What is happening, y'all? Cowboy here, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the best in-slot weapons for each vocation in Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, full disclosure, you're probably not going to need this stuff, because without the existence of hard mode, eventually once you're around level 50, you're probably going to be sweeping all the content, but regardless, I know how people love to min-max. So we're going to be taking a look at the best in-slot weapons for each vocation, along with optimal upgrade paths. Obviously, this video is going to include significant spoilers, so if you're not through the game, I don't suggest you watch this unless you're okay with being spoiled. But with that in mind, let's jump in and talk about some weapons. And starting up first, we are going to be taking a look at the fighter best in slot. Now, this would be Dragon's Dogma and Dragon's Aegis. These are both purchased from the Dragon Forged, up at 828 strength and 702 knockdown, 576 strength and 710 knockdown. By far the strongest weapons fighter has available. Now, for some honorable mentions, I do want to call out Daughter of the Evening, which we can find in the Vermin Vault. This is useful in the fact that it can reflect Medusa's gaze back at her, allowing you to petrify her and then get a easy preserved head anytime you fight a Medusa. Additionally, we also have the Molten Fury and the Exalted. These are a good bit behind Dragon's Dogma, but we have the Fire element on Molten Fury and the Holy element on the Exalted, making them decent choices if you want to work some more elemental damage into the build. For this whole setup, I would run everything with the Dwarven enhancement. Dwarven is especially useful on weapons that have element worked in, since it's also going to raise the magic potential of the weapon as well. But these two come from the Dragon Forged, this from the Vermin Vault. Molten Fury and Exalted. Molten Fury you're going to get down from Mountain Base Cave, and Exalted will be in Drobnir's Grotto. Moving on from there, let's talk about Thief weapons. Now, the best, technically, weapon that you can get with Thief is the Dragon's Vein, and this is sold by the Dragon Forged. However, late game, or post game, I should say, you can also buy Heaven's Key, which, while it has lower strength, I think this actually pulls ahead as a better weapon. Talking about Dragon's Vein briefly, though, just comparing stat breakdowns here, because I know a lot of people are curious on like Batali versus the Dwarven. You can see we're a little bit behind on the damage from the strength, but the knockdown power is significantly higher here. And with a weapon like Thief, I think that the knockdown power is definitely going to pull it ahead, just because you don't have a lot of innate knockdown with the class, and so having more knockdown is certainly going to be helpful. Regardless, though, I think you are better off working with Heaven's Key. Now, this is a post-game purchase from various shops. We're at 745 compared to 793, but we have 850 magic on it and 45% holy. And I want to point out that with things like element on daggers, even though it's only 45%, this kind of follows the same logic as Monster Hunter. You know, we have 120% here, we have 150% here, so it's a lower element percentage because we're getting much faster attacks in with it. That doesn't mean like, oh, well, it's not doing a lot of holy damage. Like, this thing will do plenty of holy damage. But the reason Heaven's Key ultimately pulls ahead, just having that 850 magic and obviously having a 569 knockdown value really puts this up at the top as the Thief weapon. Especially in the late game, you know, there's going to be a lot of undead, a lot of dual hands. This absolutely shreds those targets. And on top of that, that extra knockdown power is quite helpful, making Heaven's Key the clear winner, in my opinion. Moving on from there to Ranger, the Hydra Husk. This is also a post-game shop purchase weapon. This outclasses the weapon that Dragon Forge gives you, getting up to 807 strength. I also think Dwarven is the best choice here, putting us up at 638 knockdown power, allowing you to easily pop harpies out of the air with even your basic attacks. I do want to give an honorable mention to the Medusan Spellbow. You get this the first time you take down the Medusa, and this obviously comes with a experience boost attached to it. So this is a weapon that you can have on while you're farming if you are trying to power level. 751 compared to 807, so not that far behind. But of course, this does weigh a whopping 8.32 kilograms, making it one of the heaviest weapons in the game. So unless you are experienced farming, you are going to be better off with Hydra Husk. Moving on from there to the Mage type weapons, there's really two choices here, Dragon's Nous and the Legion's Might. For a pawn, I do think Legion's Might is going to end up being better, considering it's at 1027 compared to 1071. Very small difference, but the self-res is probably going to end up pulling that ahead. If you're playing for yourself, obviously Dragon's Nous is going to be the better choice. This we get from collecting all of the various secret tokens, not all of them. I think it's like 200 or so, or 180 or something. And then Dragon's Nous, this one is just purchased from the Dragon Forged. Moving on from that, let's take a look at Warrior. And with Warrior, after a lot of testing, I've come to the conclusion that Dragon's Flight is the best weapon in the game. Now, this was a really hard toss-up between Dragon's Flight and Dragon's Bite, and Dragon's Bite supposedly has a unique effect of the damage amplifying based on the more damage that you take. I tried testing this quite a bit, and I found that even at 50% health, I was doing roughly the same damage with Bite as I was with Flight. And on top of that, I think the hitbox on Dragon's Flight is actually a little bit better, so that was pulling it ahead. And that's not even to mention the fact that this has a massive damage boost against dragons. And testing these two versus a dragon, even when I was at roughly 75% health to account for whatever buff this would give me, I was doing about 80% more damage with Dragon's Flight. So almost double hitting a swing with Dragon's Flight compared to Bite. And, you know, even though I really like how Dragon's Bite looks, ultimately I think that puts Dragon's Flight ahead. Now, the Dragon's Flight is a late game shop purchase and post game. Dragon's Bite, if you do like this one more, is purchased from the Dragon Forged. I do want to call out knockdown on this weapon. Now, this is something else that I was testing. Obviously, we lose a little bit of strength, but we almost double our knockdown power. And initially that seems very attractive, but the more I tested with the weapon, the more that I found that Warrior has such heavy knockdown already that as long as I was primarily going for weak points, I found that it didn't matter. Some other people have been testing this as well and pulling from the conclusions that they found. Ultimately, if you are hitting non-critical areas, so hitting like the legs of a dragon or the legs of a cyclops or something, you'll likely pull ahead having the extra knockdown power. But if you are consistently going for weak points, such as the heart on the dragon or head sniping an ogre or a cyclops, you're going to be better off just going with Batali because you're going to have roughly the same amount of stagger anyway. In this case, with things like Mountain Breaker as well as our uppercut, you can do a lot of stagger potential very easy with Warrior, making it one of the classes where Batali could potentially pull ahead compared to Dwarven. Now, that definitely is not the case with weapons like Cinderspine and Cyclopean Thunder, because these weapons also have magic added onto them. Going for the Dwarven is definitely going to pull them ahead since we are enhancing both strength and magic at the same time. And these are just decent alternative choices if you want to have element worked into the weapon. Cyclopean Thunder we can find in Dark Beast's Den, or you can find it at the east of Volcanic Island Camp, whereas Cinderspine, we find that in the same area where we found Molten Fury. We're down on over here, no, down here in Mountain Base Cave. Moving on from there, taking a look at the Sorcerer weapon, there's really only one choice here, and it's going to be Dragon's Wit. On a magic-based class, this gets up over 1,000 magic damage, up at 1097. On a Sorcerer, not a Mage, this would even go higher, but just by far the strongest sorcery weapon available. This is one that is purchased from the Dragon Forge. Now going on over to the hybrid class weapons. For Mystic Spearhand, Limworm Fang is going to be the strongest weapon we have available. This is purchased from the Dragon Forged, 928, 837 with 669 knockdown when done with Dwarven. A decent alternative here is going to be Renwit. This is a post-game shot purchase weapon. You can see it's a little bit behind on some stats, but we do have the ice element worked into this. So if you're a big fan of ice, this is a decent alternative choice. As for the Magick Archer, Grin Mahar is going to be the best in-slot weapon for Magick Archer by far. There's just nothing else that's really going to be able to compare to the damage of this. And on top of that, it has the bonus of doing extra damage up against the dragons. This one is going to be purchased from the Dragon Forged, like other dragon weapons, but incredibly strong weapon if you're playing as Magick Archer. Lastly, for Trickster, we have two that I want to call out. The Dragon's Whale Litany, which is purchased from the Dragon Forge, and this is technically stronger. We have 586 and 714, but over here on Whimsical Daydream, we have 551 and 666. And the reason I call out Whimsical Daydream is because when you're playing as the Trickster, you know, even though those stats are going to bolster how effective your illusion is, they're not as important, in my opinion, as the raw stats on other weapons where you're attacking. And going with Whimsical, on the other hand, this gives you a chance on hit to gain gold. Generally, you're going to get like 10 gold per hit, but there's a small chance that you could proc a hit for 50,000 gold, which is quite significant. So with that in mind, I do think Whimsical Daydream pulls ahead as the best in slot Trickster weapon. But if you're not worried about gold and you're looking strictly for stats, Dragon's Whale Litany will be the better choice. This, of course, being from the Dragon Forged, whereas this is from completing one of the secondary puzzles that the Sphinx offers you. And with that in mind, that covers all of our best in slot weapons. Like I said, I don't really think you need to worry all that much about this stuff. I think eventually when and if we get DLC and if we get a hard mode added, this information would be a lot more relevant. But as it stands now, you know, you're going to be able to trounce endgame. In terms of upgrading, just a general rule of thumb, just to go through. In general, Dwarven is going to win in almost every case. It's just, it does. With Warrior, I think you can get away doing Batali just because you already have such insane knockdown potential that, you know, even though this goes up to 1063, you're effectively already at the knockdown power cap before that. So unless you're hitting non-weak points, you're going to be better off using Batali. And then for using magic weapons, I do think you're going to be better off using Elven, just because magic spells, depending on the spell you use, kind of already have knockdown built in. You know, if you are using Meteoron, you're going to see huge knockdowns from Meteoron. But in general, magic is the type of class where your job is to nuke. I'm not really there worried about knockdown. So I do think going the Elven route is going to be better there. I actually tested looking at Elven compared to Dwarven on Gridmahar, and even though it is slightly stronger, I think you're still better off going Dwarven in this case, just because that additional knockdown power is going to be quite useful for Magick Archer. So either way, that's going to wrap things up. Thanks for coming on by. Hopefully y'all are having fun with Dragon's Dogma, and I'll catch y'all soon with a different guide.